Alright, here we go. First section in the Algebra 1 book. Before we jump right into algebra and what makes algebra, we're just going to remind you quickly about the basic operations of mathematics and then perhaps a new idea, though I don't think it's a brand new idea for a lot of you. Um, okay, so the first thing we learned about in math was probably addition. We know what that is. We're just grouping two numbers together, like 3 plus 2, and seeing how many we have altogether. Right, so 3 added 2, you get 5. And then we start in with the idea of subtraction. We're going to take not 3 plus 2, we're going to take 3 and probably used words like take away 2. 3 take away 2, 3 minus 2 is 1. And really what we're doing is taking a negative number, a negative 2, we're adding that negative 2 to 3. So this sign here really is the introduction of negative numbers. Then one day maybe we wanted to add 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. We want to add it together 4 times. And I like to think of mathematicians often as people who like to use the least amount of ink as possible because maybe ink used to be expensive. I don't know. We just want to save some time. So rather than 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 and however long this string of 3's you want it to be, we're just going to take 3 and multiply it by how many times you want to add it together. So 3 times 4 just means 3 added together 4 times. So that's the idea of multiplication. Multiplication is repeated addition. We just repeat the addition of the same number over and over and over. And in this case we do it 4 times. Then there is the idea of division. And that's really, as multiplication is repeated addition, division's really repeated subtraction. If I take 12 and I divide it by 4, what I'm trying to figure out is how many times can I subtract 4, or how many times do I have to subtract 4 to get from 12 to 0. So if I take 12 and I subtract 4, and subtract 4, and subtract 4, now I've gone from 12 down to 8, down to 4, down to 0. So I subtracted 3 4's, so 12 divided by 4 is 3. So really, multiplication and division are ways of representing these two operations over and over and over. So this new idea of a power, that's going to be a P. Powers are just ways of repeating multiplication over and over, just like multiplication is a way of repeating addition over and over. And so if I do 3 to the 4th, it's telling me something about doing repeated multiplication, doing multiplication over and over and over, just like this is repeated addition. So this just means take 4 factors of 3 and multiply them all together. Right? This tells me how many times to add 3. This tells me how many times to multiply 3. Okay? So that's just a new idea, or maybe not that new to some of you. The idea of a power. Just it says this many factors. And a factor is something you multiply by something else. So we're going to use 4 factors of 3. Okay. Just repeated multiplication. So, algebra. What makes algebra algebra at its most basic is the use of letters to represent numbers. Right. So algebra letters representing numbers. Alright, it can get a lot more complicated than that, the definition of algebra, but this is the most basic definition really. We take letters and we let them represent numbers. And that really makes trying to figure out what that letter represents, trying to figure out what that number is. It's a lot easier if we just use a letter to stand in its place. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it was really a big deal to move from not having that idea to using that. So these letters can be whatever we want. Any letter we want, we can use English letters, we can use Greek letters, we could use whatever we want. Just a way to let a symbol stand in the place of a number. So these are what we call variables. Okay, we call those variables. I would prefer to more often call them the unknown quantities, because that's what really what we want to figure out in the future is what does this represent? What number is this? Before we do that, though, if we just take one of these, like x, and we put it together with something else, with a number or with another letter, now what we have is an expression. Okay. An expression is just, really, we don't even have to have letters in here. An expression is just numbers interacting with each other with those basic operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. We can use powers, just anything that causes numbers to interact mathematically. That's an expression. Now this is different from an equation, and later this is going to be an important distinction to make: expression and the difference between an expression and an equation. Notice this expression, it could be anything we want. X could be anything we want. An equation, though, if we said 8x equals 24, now x can't just be anything we want. It has to be 3. But up here, we could let it be anything. We could let it be 3. We could let it be 9. We could let it be 6. We could do anything we want with x. We could make x 1/4. X can be anything we want. And when we plug a number in there and just calculate what that is, then that's called evaluating the expression. So if we were to let x be 3, then we would get, let me use a different color. If we were to let x be 3, we'd get 24. If we were to let it be 9, we'd get 72. If we were to let it be 6, it'd be 48. If we were to let it be 1/4, it would be 2, and so on and so on. When we plug a number in for the variable, that's what we call evaluating the expression. Okay, so just really vocab there. We could say we plug in 3 for x and we find out what it is. Or we could say we evaluate the expression. And specifically for this, we could say if we evaluate the expression when, let's see, which expression? This expression. If we evaluate the expression 8x when x equals 3, then 8x equals 24. And that's just one example, and we have 3 more here. So that's evaluating. And before I go on and show you some examples in the next video, I'll just use an expression that involves that new idea, the power, like x to the 3rd power. So if x is 5, so if we evaluate the expression, I'm going to shorten that up, the expression x to the 3rd power when x equals 2, then x to the 3rd equals, well, 2 to the 3rd, and that would just be 8. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. Okay? So, we should now understand what a power is, right? Something to a power, 3 to the 4th power. That's just 4 factors of 3. Okay? A variable. What's a variable? It's a letter representing a number. And that is what makes algebra algebra, is letting letters stand in the place of numbers. We have an expression. That's just really numbers interacting. Okay, and if we put those variables into an expression, 8 plus 5 is an expression. If we do 8 plus x, now we're using variables. Variables are what make algebra algebra. And so if you put a variable into an expression, you have an algebraic expression. Okay, so an algebraic expression, that's an expression using variables. Okay, and then we just need to know how to evaluate an algebraic expression. So evaluating an algebraic expression. We could say that's just plugging in different values for the variable. The variable or variables. You could have multiple unknown quantities and plug in values for all of those variables and see what the expression is worth. So those are the basic ideas that we should have pretty solidly grasped. And I'll just end this video and start in on the next video, which will be some specific examples.